field of human conflict was so much, owed by so many to so few.
Winston Churchill went on to say, the battle for the Atlantic was the dominating factor all through the war. Never for one moment could we forget that everything elsewhere depended on its outcome. By 1940, severe merchant shipping losses from U-boat operations alone totaled more than 2 million tons of supplies. Convoy capacities were stretched to the limit. The loss of food and military equipment was felt in all areas. Early in 1941, with France overrun, Great Britain was fighting the battles at sea against the Axis powers virtually alone. The difficulties in securing the vital sea lanes began to concern the American and British commanders. Future plans were in jeopardy of success. By the end of 1942, with the United States now in the war, everything hung in the balance. Allied strategists knew they had to win the long and bitter battle between the U-boats and the convoy escorts. The Atlantic was to become a bloody battleground. As the convoys plowed through the heavy seas, even with beefed-up escorts, the long passages made merchantmen ready targets for U-boat Wolfpacks. The British naval defensive strategy started in 1939. The plan was to gain time to build a sufficient naval force for convoy duty. Time was also needed to train personnel and mold an offensive capability. And still more would be needed to put the plan in motion. The first objective was the defense of shipping in home waters. Second, a defense that would avoid having ships sail around the Cape of Good Hope, a lengthy and dangerous voyage. Trade links to the Mediterranean and Indian Oceans had to be kept open. Vital resources shipped through those routes meant survival for the British. May 1939. Grand Admiral Eric Raeder issued orders to plan a series of operations in the North Sea to create as much confusion for the British as possible. The German U-boat fleet consisted of 56 submarines with well-trained crews who had begun training in secret years before. The Versailles Treaty did not allow the Germans to have U-boats. To Hitler, agreements were made to be broken. Admiral Raeder's objective? To attack shipping in the Atlantic and the approaches to British ports. Hitler's ominous phrase in the German battle plans: fighting methods will never fail to be employed because some international regulation is opposed to them. August 19, 1939. The first type of large ocean-going U-boats were sent out to their Atlantic patrol areas. 7 of the smaller coastal type were dispatched to lay mines in the English Channel ports. 6 more were sent to patrol the North Sea. The Royal Navy's task at the time was to try and draw a noose around Germany and Italy. They deployed their fleet to try and blockade ships from reaching their ports. The British Navy was in the North Sea, off the French coast and guarding further west in the Mediterranean Sea. Drawing this noose around the German and Italian supply lines stretched the Royal Navy's forces to the breaking point. The job of filling in the gaps was given to the land-based Royal Air Force, who had but limited success with it. With the Soviet-German Non-Aggression Pact in force, this left the East as the only possible supply line that would have little or no U-boat interference. From the war's outbreak to the end of 1939, the Royal Navy seized over 500,000 tons of supplies destined for Germany. The noose had tightened, but was still only of limited effectiveness. Hitler's Barbarossa plan, the attack on Russia, and the need for additional supplies would be felt later in the ground war. Raw material was the lifeblood to turn out the military equipment that would be needed to fight a two-front war. The Admiral's fear of unrestricted submarine warfare was realized within hours of the declaration of war. The Donaldson liner Athena, carrying civilians, was torpedoed by U-300 200 miles west of the Hebrides. She sank with a loss of 112 lives. The plan for the defense of ocean trade was to have been by the patrol of key areas, along with evasive routing of merchant ships. These plans were quickly changed to the full convoy system. It was the only chance to minimize shipping losses. A single ship at sea had very little chance of reaching safe port. The lack of destroyers and other escort vessels forced the creation of the limited convoy. The ships protecting the convoy could sail only a specific distance. They would then leave the convoy, and merchantmen would proceed independently without any cover. The U-boats just had to wait. Their targets came to them. The losses in ships, supplies, and crews were horrendous. A disastrous picture was shaping up for the British and her allies. Germany's planned U-boat construction was on schedule. Launchings were becoming almost a weekly event. Admiral Karl Dönitz, now commander of the submarine fleet, boasted of 900 boats within 2 years. With this flotilla, he said he could control the seas for Germany. The Atlantic was to become a very cruel sea. If the German Navy could build a 900 U-boat fleet, merchant and military shipping could be devastated. The losses on the high seas would be irreplaceable. Even as matters stood, many convoy losses equaled the amount of supplies an Army division would need to go into battle. The British naval offensive against the U-boats led to disaster. 200 groups were formed. Each one consisted of 1 aircraft carrier and 4 destroyers. The Ark Royal was almost torpedoed by U-boat 39. The Alert's escorting destroyers counterattacked, sank the U-boat, and captured her crew. 3 days later, the U-29 sighted the carrier Courageous, and with a torpedo attack, sent her to the bottom. 519 hands were lost. Realizing the ineffectiveness of this hunter formation, the British Admiralty quickly withdrew the Ark Royal to safer home waters and based her with the home fleet. Some relief came from negotiations between Churchill and Roosevelt over the release of 50 obsolescent destroyers through Lend-Lease. These flush-deck 4-pipe destroyers were quickly overhauled and taken into the British and Canadian navies and served in the already overstretched escort service until newer ships could be brought online. Shipyards large and small were busy building destroyers, destroyer escorts, and corvettes. With these launchings, the Allies would be able to mount an effective convoy escort system. Within days of the Japanese strike at Pearl Harbor, Hitler declared war on the United States. Churchill now viewed the United States as an active ally. With this action, the U.S. Navy began to commit units of her destroyer and destroyer escorts for convoy protection duty. Now, for the first time, there was some defensive strength sailing with the merchant ships. U-boat attacks increased at a rapid pace. Daily headlines reported the loss of ships. Dönitz assured Hitler that with more submarines, he could sink 800,000 tons of shipping a month. This would force Britain to her knees. Dönitz had still not received his full quota of U-boats, and he emphasized this to Hitler whenever he had the opportunity. Iron Cross awards to U-boat captains and crews became a familiar ritual. They were now taking their place alongside the Luftwaffe aces. Ships sunk were now as important as planes shot down. Allied intelligence confirmed that several hundred new U-boats would soon be launched. They had no doubt that the German shipbuilding industry had the capacity to build many more if so ordered. With a U-boat fleet now boasting 300 operational boats, Dönitz could now make good his promise of 800,000 tons of Allied shipping losses a month. During the early part of the war, only 16 U-boat sinkings were reported. Based on the tremendous amount of Allied shipping sunk, the military commanders knew that if they were to carry out their ground war strategy, they would have to find a way to regain control of the sea lanes. Unforeseen help came when the HMS Somali captured the German weather station ship München, stationed in the North Atlantic. The prize was the ship's Enigma coding machine. It was totally intact. 2 days later, the destroyer Bulldog and the corvette Broadway captured the U-110 under similar circumstances. Although the U-boat sank the following day, the ship's Enigma machine, cipher books, and rotor settings then in use were taken with important papers. For the first time, the code breakers at Bletchley Park in England had the crucial material to break Dönitz's U-boat transmission signals. They were successful, but Dönitz, noting increased U-boat losses, had his code changed. The code breakers were now in the dark. A new radar system was installed on escort ships called ASDIC, short for Advanced Triple Impulse Positioning Finding System, which was now more effective in locating prowling U-boats before they reached the convoys. Realizing the effectiveness of ASDIC, U-boat commanders moved in a more concentrated area. While it gave them some safety, it made them vulnerable to escort attacks. The Hedgehog and the Squid, newly developed depth charges, enabled escort vessels to hurl their explosives far out in front of themselves. They deployed at different depths and speeds. The U-boat, once running in front of the ship, was normally in a safe position. With the Hedgehog, it had no place to hide. With all of Admiral Dönitz's planning, his supply of new offensive capabilities failed to keep up with the Allies' rapid advance in defensive equipment. U-boats were able to avoid ASDIC by moving closer to their targets. Its radio waves were based on long-range detection. Allied scientists then designed an extremely short wavelength detection system that could pinpoint their exact location. The hunted were now beginning to arm themselves for the hunt. May 1943, south of Greenland. A violent storm scatters an outward-bound convoy. A Wolfpack of 12 U-boats concentrate around it. 2 anti-submarine groups are ordered out of St. John's, Nova Scotia. While the desperate convoy tries to form up again, and before the support ships can arrive, the Wolfpack sinks 5 ships during a night attack. In the daylight, sinking and burning ships dot the ocean. Survivors cling to floating debris. Oil-covered seamen are almost near death. In the midst of all this, the escort vessel HMS Pink, a corvette, attacks and sinks the U-192. That evening, 2 support groups arrive and are in position to attack. For the first time, U-boat commanders find themselves on the defensive. The new technology and detection has made them vulnerable to attack by the escort vessels. The Wolfpacks continue to attack, but one by one are detected and driven off before further casualties can be inflicted on the convoy. The U-638 is hunted down and sunk. The U-125 is pinpointed with ASDIC and depth charged with direct Hedgehog hits. With a violent explosion, she sinks to the bottom. U-531 is rammed and sunk. The U-438 is also detected, trapped by escorts, depth charged, and sunk. Allied aircraft operating over the convoy accounted for 2 more of the Wolfpack. In a panic crash dive to avoid the hunters, the U-659 and the U-439 collide in the night and sink. This was a severe loss for Dönitz's fleet. It became known throughout the German Navy as Black May. But one defeat at sea for the U-boats did not spell immediate victory for the Allies. They would soon learn that Dönitz and his eager U-boat commanders would seek revenge by expanding their range to the American coastline. Now, with this challenge, the hunted became the hunter. (1918). Lieutenant Karl Dönitz was in command of a submarine, the U-68. Dönitz prepares to attack a British convoy, but the diving planes on his boat malfunction, and the U-68 is forced to the surface in the middle of the convoy. The escorts open fire with all their guns. He surrenders. Dönitz had a short-lived career as a U-boat captain. He was imprisoned in England for 10 months. This gave him time to refine what he felt the basic principles of submarine warfare ought to be. In less than 20 years, he had the opportunity to test his strategy. Dönitz said that attacking with one boat was a hit-or-miss situation. The British thought with a one-boat attack, the Aztec detecting system would be a key factor in protecting convoys. The attacking U-boat could be pinpointed, attacked, and driven off. Dönitz theorized that a larger number of U-boats submerged by day attacking with torpedoes and by night attacking with deck guns on the surface could be far more effective in destroying a convoy. Seldom used in World War I, but now advanced in planning by Dönitz, Wolfpack warfare was ready to be tested. His highly trained crews were now eager, and the opportunities were out there. With increased shipping to support the Allied ground war, Wolfpack attacks proved to be a great military success for Hitler's conquest plans. During one of Hitler's early visits to the U-boat command center, Dönitz showed him the sophisticated communication systems he used to contact his U-boats. Dönitz explained to Hitler how he could coordinate the movement of his boats in their patrol areas. As soon as he received intelligence reports of oncoming convoys, he could signal his U-boats to converge into a single area and be ready to attack. Dönitz pointed out that at a precise moment as the convoy approached the U-boats, he would organize them into Wolfpacks for the kill. While the convoy system was a safeguard for shipping, it also increased the opportunity for torpedo attacks. Although the U-boats were controlled from a single command center, once the convoy was in attack range, each captain could pick his own target. Dönitz was known to be an impatient officer. In eagerness to be part of the battle, he sent frequent messages and useless orders. He insisted that his U-boat commanders report back to him with reports of the success of their attacks. Orders at the command center were given at a fevered pitch. Detailed information from U-boats was demanded and had to arrive at a precise time. Dönitz needed this information to plot his submarines on charts, to estimate the position of convoys, to organize his Wolfpacks. The British were able to listen in after they broke his secret code. In spite of having this important information, they still could not control his attacks in the sea lanes. Dönitz was concerned about his continuous radio signals with his U-boats. He knew that the British could possibly locate his boats with their radio directional finders. He weighed the success of his sinkings, and this gave him the confidence and reassurance that his was the way to control shipping in all waters. A special radio that enabled transmissions at a depth of 15 feet below the surface was developed. His unit had become one of the most talky of military organizations, giving details of the action, torpedo hits, and sinking claims. All of this was communicated back to Dönitz. Victory and loss statistics were overwhelmingly with Dönitz and his captains. Record numbers of sinkings, heavy losses of supplies, and the deaths of seasoned seamen. And in the meantime, the British frantically trying to replace what they could. Dönitz ordered one U-boat to shadow a convoy during the daylight hours. The U-boat commander reported his position, speed, and heading by radio at night. All attacks were made on the surface under the cover of darkness. The low superstructure of the boat made it almost invisible to the escort ships. With the advantage of night, surface speed, and maneuverability, hit-and-run attacks were always successful. Dönitz knew that his plan had a weakness. The shadowing U-boat had to make a series of communications that reported speed, position, and course changes. This navigational information also had to apply to the U-boats in the area. Now both Dönitz and the Allies were plotting these same movements in their tracking rooms. Even with this advantage, the Allies, short of support groups, planes, and escort vessels, could not stop these attacks. In many cases, the convoy support ships came late, only to find the hulks of burned-out freighters, debris-loaded sea, survivors, and the dead. The U-boat battle was not limited to the North and South Atlantic Oceans. Dönitz's fleet, along with the raiders operating from Japanese supply bases, patrolled in the Indian Ocean. This was England's lifeline from India, Australia, and New Zealand. The Murmansk Run in the Arctic Ocean. This was one of the most brutal sea routes to bring supplies to Russia. It was not just a battle with an unseen enemy. It was also a battle with the fury of storms and freezing weather. Crews of sinking ships had very little chance of surviving. On land, military logistical support was imperative in defeating the Axis. It was recognized that continuous defeat in the sea lanes would prolong the war and could even bring defeat to the Allied goals. As early as 1941, the combined shipping losses from all enemy activity was almost 1,300 ships, totaling over 4 million tons. This was a loss beyond the Allied ability to replace. Dönitz often complained to Hitler that fighting a war without air support was not fighting in the 20th century. It was the German Naval Command's efficient cryptographic service, known as B Service, that provided the intelligence information Dönitz needed for his campaigns. B Service monitored all Allied radio traffic and broke their top-secret codes and ciphers. Dönitz had crucial information on convoy routings. From 1939 to 1943, B Service revised codes which enabled the U-boats to position themselves at the right place for attack. The losses were reaching crippling numbers. From B Service's intelligence reports, Dönitz was also able to detect that his secret information was leaked to the Allies. He changed his codes, and so it became a battle for the code breakers. The Allied plan for the offensive in the Atlantic was planned for the late autumn of 1942. The Royal Navy's Admiral Sir Max Horton was made commander-in-chief. He was a submarine officer himself with great experience. Horton organized his command center to plot out all merchant shipping, Allied naval, and U-boat movements. Tracking rooms were established into which came every bit of information on U-boat activity. Reports from Allied agents in the occupied countries were scrutinized and recorded. Arrivals and departures of U-boats were meticulously tracked and fed into the center. Sightings were plotted with regularity and accuracy. Of these, wireless transmissions and bearings before and after attacks were the most valuable in aiding the destroyer groups to hunt down the U-boats. The tracking room was connected to every Huff-Duff wireless direction finding station on land and at sea. Within minutes of a U-boat sending a radio message, its position and bearing could be recorded. By plotting these on a chart, they were pinpointed for Allied air and surface support units to attack. In 1942, the U.S. Navy had only a small group of her destroyers and destroyer escorts protecting convoys. With the Pacific Island campaigns advancing and the planned assault on North Africa, the ships were withdrawn to protect troop transports, amphibious landings, and aircraft carrier activity. The plan was to return these units to escort duty by the middle of 1943, but again, the convoys were bereft of protection. The Atlantic gales and torturous high seas kept the shipping casualties down. Both the convoys and U-boats endured the wrath of the North Atlantic duty. No man felt safe in this treacherous weather. Just as the U.S. Navy broke the news about their convoy withdrawal plans, word came of one of the most disastrous convoy battles ever fought in the Atlantic. A fast convoy of 25 ships sailed from Halifax to England. At the same time, a slower convoy of 52 ships left for the same destination. A patrolling U-boat sighted the fast convoy and contacted a Wolfpack of 8 U-boats. Mayhem. Over the next 3 days and nights, 12 merchant ships were sunk. The devastation continued. The slow convoy sailing ahead was sighted, and a Wolfpack of 12 U-boats converged on it. Now the two convoys sailing in the same direction on the same course closed up. The two Wolfpacks merged into one. In the confusion, the escorts could do little to defend or fight off the attackers. 21 ships out of the two convoys were lost. 141,000 tons of much-needed equipment, armament, and food were lost, along with the brave seamen who manned those ships. This was a serious defeat for the Allies. The loss of so many needed supplies for the Allied military units was immediately felt. In this class of ships, only one U-boat was sunk by an escort. This stunning victory gave Dönitz the confidence that now Hitler would authorize his request for additional U-boats. January 1942. After a meeting with President Roosevelt, Harry Hopkins said, "I think he will make some changes in naval command." President Roosevelt moved Admiral Ernest Joseph King to Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Navy. King realized the seriousness of the Atlantic submarine situation. He was known to be a hard worker and amazed his younger colleagues and subordinates with his vigor, energy, and directness in giving orders. King stated that to overcome the Nazi terror at sea would require the formation of an anti-submarine control command that would coordinate all attacks against U-boats. The fleet that did not have ships operated out of the third floor of the Navy building in Washington, D.C. They consisted of highly trained people who played a key part in anti-submarine warfare. A 24-hour shift of personnel worked in front of maps and charts in a plotting room. Teletypes and radio messages supplied these people with split-second information on U-boat movements. These communications were necessary for the Atlantic Naval Command, who could then plot their offensive actions. The Atlantic Ocean was divided down the middle by CHOP, short for Change of Operational Control. It gave the British the east and the Americans the western sector. This led to confusion and loss of efficiency when a convoy screen was of mixed British, Canadian, and American escort ships. U.S. Naval Command claimed the British had no uniform procedures in tactics and gunnery instructions. More importantly, they used two sets of different signals to communicate with escort vessels. This created confusion. The Royal Navy looked at American procedures as immature. They challenged the effectiveness of convoys in the U.S. Navy's hunter-killer groups. In the spring of 1943, Admiral King realized that rules must be enforced to improve anti-submarine coordination. Dönitz's convoy blitzes were being reported with staggering results and figures. The loss of ships and crews were mounting on a daily basis due to Germany's ability to break the Allied codes. This provided Dönitz with exact convoy locations. The result was carnage. Burning tankers, exploding ships, a floating hell for seamen. Dönitz now felt he had the British on the brink of defeat. He knew from intercepted messages that the Allied navies were close to a panic. Their U-boat defenses were failing, and the United States-British infighting was known to the Germans. Dönitz continued to press Hitler for his quota of submarines. This was part of his initial Atlantic U-boat control plan. Hitler still did not approve the building of additional U-boats, a decision he would regret. The tide turned somewhat when 41 U-boats were sunk in a 3-month period. Admiral King then decided to take command of the anti-submarine warfare and advised the Navy Department and the Joint Chiefs that his 10th Fleet was to become the anti-submarine command center. To counter Dönitz's rapidly changing tactics, King was given control of long-range aircraft auxiliary carriers, escort ships, and submarines. With the force King formed, killer groups were under his command. The 10th Fleet was operational. They now became the Hunter. The Yellow Peril code name was the 10th Fleet's major method of direct communication with those captains of escort vessels, destroyers, and destroyer escorts. They had the job of destroying U-boats. They knew that a Yellow Peril communication had to be read and followed carefully. They were now King's killers. The U.S. Navy, Royal Navy squabbles were now over. To assure a smooth command, Admiral King created a unified convoy routing division operation. USS Bogue, an escort carrier patrolling in an assigned area, received a 10th Fleet message that a U-boat was in their sector. Huff Duffs, the high-frequency direction finders, kept tabs on the moving U-boat. The Bogue was given course changes and proceeded in the direction of the U-boat, which was now pinpointed off the Grand Banks of Newfoundland. The escort carrier Bogue was a veteran of 10 U-boat kills. Her group consisted of 4 destroyers and 6 Canadian frigates as her screen. The carrier carried 9 Wildcats and 14 Avenger torpedo bombers. An Avenger sighted the snorkeled U-boat cruising on the surface. She was heading at full speed for the safety of storm lines building up in the Grand Banks. The Avenger attacked with all its armament. The U-boat was hurt. She submerged, but the captain could only take her to periscope and snorkel depth. This was her only chance to get rid of poisonous chlorine gas which had escaped from her cracked batteries. 5 Avengers joined in the attack. By midday, the U-boat was so badly damaged that all hands had to abandon ship. Continually hit by the Avengers' bombs, she finally plunged to the bottom of the sea. A Huff Duff station identified a boat heading in a straight northward course. The U-boat was the elusive U-505, homeward bound. Oberleutnant Harold Lang was in command. Captain Dan Gallery, Can-Do Carrier Group, was ordered to run down the latest U-boat bearing. Running with the escort carrier Guadalcanal was the destroyer USS Chatelaine and the USS Pillsbury, along with the USS Jenkins. The Guadalcanal was moving into a vulnerable position, so the attack was left to the destroyers. 2 Wildcats circled overhead. The order was a machine gun attack only, to chase the crew overboard. The destroyer attacked with full depth charge pattern. The attack holed the outer hull and the U-boat took water. Captain Lang blew his tanks and surfaced 700 yards from the Chatelaine. The crew frantically escaped from hatches and jumped overboard. The order was given to cease fire and away boarding parties. Captain Gallery of the Guadalcanal had planned this possibility against U-boats in this situation. His plan was to capture a submarine. The boarding party shoved off in whaleboats with salvage gear. Lieutenant Albert A. David and 2 petty officers were the first aboard and were followed shortly by other crew members. Lieutenant David quickly gathered up the code books, important papers, and charts. They then immediately disconnected the demolition charges and closed the sea valves to stop the sub's flooding. The U-boat engines were secured within a half an hour. A special salvage party from the carrier was now aboard, and the U-505 was in tow, flying an American flag from its conning tower. To maintain security, the U-boat capture was kept secret. The war was not over, for this was the middle of 1944. There were more ill-fated voyages for U-boats. The hunter-killer groups like Can Do caused the demise of the Dönitz U-boat fleet. The snorkel-equipped U-boats now restored the vigor of U-boat captains and their crews. Dönitz eagerly approved the outfitting of U-boats with this equipment. They would no longer have to surface to recharge batteries where the U-boat would be vulnerable to attack by aircraft and escort vessels. With the U-boat running below surface and taking in air and venting noxious gases at periscope depth, it would be hard to detect. The Allied command recognized this new challenge. Escort vessels reported back to them that these U-boats would be hard to find and attack. The U-boat was still the hunter, achieving a staggering figure of ships, supplies, and crews lost to the Allies. As the war wound down, there were 950 anti-submarine warships and 2,200 anti-submarine aircraft deployed in key areas. German shipbuilding construction was still delivering approximately 20 U-boats a month, most of them used as replacements. In spite of continuous U-boat losses, the moral and fighting spirit of the crews remained exceptionally high. But the backbone of the Dönitz fleet was about to be broken. In the Atlantic, 23 out of 36 patrols were lost. At the Toulon U-boat base, American aircraft caught and destroyed 11 boats that were moored. The hunter-killer carrier USS Bode killed another one southwest of Cape Fear. In another action, 4 U-boats heading toward their Norwegian bases were caught at sea. They were depth-charged and hedgehogged. The attacks killed all 4. After the attempt on Hitler's life, Dönitz met with him and pledged unshaken loyalty to the Führer's conquest plan. Dönitz was overcome by the admiration Hitler showed him and the favors he received in return. Dönitz was invited to secret meetings in which Hitler had planned the Holocaust of his enemies. At these meetings, Hitler relied on Dönitz for answers to solve some problems. Dönitz was now becoming more involved in the ugliness of the Nazi philosophy. Huff Duff was the Allied network of locating U-boat positions. Now advanced, it picked up voice and code signals and within a split second showed the direction of the transmission. 2 or more Huff Duffs could now plot the U-boats within miles of their actual position. Huff Duff's speed of detection confused Dönitz's tactical command and plans. In 1943, U-boat activity in the Mediterranean took a heavy toll of shipping. At Columbia University, scientists had developed the Magnetic Airborne Detector, or MAD. So sensitive that it could detect any bit of steel, even as small as a needle. Submarines were entering the Mediterranean Sea submerged as they passed through the Straits of Gibraltar, concealed from aircraft. Flying patrols equipped with MAD could detect entering U-boats and attack even when they were submerged. February 24th, U-761, commanded by Oberleutnant Hert Gerder, was piloting his boat through the straits and was detected by a MAD operator who notified the RAF and the American Air Forces. The U-boat crew had been at their off-duty quarters, not realizing the possibility of attack. They were hit and sunk, again falling victim to MAD, the sensitive Allied electronic detection system. The U-392 and the U-731 were next to find watery graves near the Great Rock. With mounting losses, Dönitz then withdrew his Mediterranean forces. Dönitz ordered increased attacks in the Indian Ocean, but the British mounted an aggressive anti-submarine campaign there. Only 22 ships were sunk. The first blitz was over. With only modest victories in his second blitz effort, the Indian Ocean campaign ended. His score, a total of 102 merchant ships lost, with over 600,000 tons of gross weight. The U-boat losses were again severe. Out of the 45 U-boats assigned to the Indian Ocean, 36 were lost. It was a costly victory. In June 1944, the majority of U-boats now operated very close to the British Isles. Dönitz planned an attack to disrupt the invasion by severing its logistics lifeline. 131 U-boats were given this plan of attack. 82 were killed. U-boat losses had now peaked to 60%. The high-spirited U-boat commanders were now committing suicide to make the Dönitz Wolfpack plan work. At the Toulon U-boat base, losses were rapidly mounting. Dönitz finally ordered the recall of all boats from the invasion area. 5 battered boats responded and made it back to the base. Dönitz's known method of precise moves and planning had changed to a more haphazard way of issuing orders. There was no more painstaking planning before issuing attack orders. Admitted into Hitler's inner circle, he was often seen meeting with him. The rumor was that Dönitz would succeed Hitler as chief of state, thus giving him a direct connection to the Nazis and their atrocities. Over 39,000 officers and men served in U-boats in the German Navy in World War II. Approximately 7,000 died from attacks on U-boats. Military experts considered that one of the worst defeats in any branch of the armed forces, and for which Karl Dönitz bears the majority of the blame. Karl Dönitz was appointed chief of state by Hitler. He was now to face Allied judges at the Nuremberg trials as part of the group that committed crimes against humanity. At approximately the same time, General Alfred Jodl and Admiral von Friedberg were signing the unconditional surrender papers. The last depth charge was dropped with the sinking of U-853. Dönitz churned up the oceans with his attacking Wolfpacks and with his destruction of Atlantic shipping. His battle of wits and devices against Allied naval commanders almost made him a wizard of submarine warfare. Perhaps Hitler had not made one of his fateful mistakes by not giving Dönitz his quota of U-boats. Would England have sued for peace? Would the war have been lost? These underwater lurking enemies, whose hunt continues beneath the ocean depths, will always face a cold, lonely death at the bottom of the sea.